pretend this mic next to you is live. It's just not on. So I am going to start with Lester. And the reason I'm going to start with Lester is because he was with Boise Cascade. So Lester, can you, let me look at my notes. My question was, Waikoloa Village is a relatively isolated rural place, even for the Big Island. So tell us about Boise Cascade's decision to develop Waikoloa Village in this location. What were the considerations and challenges, and what role did you play? Would you hand him the mic, please? Kim, can you flip it on and hand it to him, please? We will use mics, you guys, because everyone says, can you hear me? They can't hear you. I know this auditorium, so thank you.
Aloha. Can you hear me?
Close to your mouth.
By the time I came on deck, about 1974, 75, Boise Cascade had already started with their program as far as developing this area. And what I could glean from the meetings I went through, they expected this community to house the labor supply for the resort development that was going to be coming down the road. Boise envisioned that all that resort hotels down at the beach area would someday come to fruition, and they needed a bedroom community. That's why we ended up having the Waikoloa Village being constructed. Other things, I was not privy to the inside operations of Boise Cascade. I came in on the tail end of that period with Boise, and I was hired by Boise. My responsibility basically was to run the restaurant, the Clubhouse Restaurant, which I ran for 7 years. One of the questions here was, referral was to Jackie Pung. Did I know Jackie? And I worked with her. She was very warm, compassionate, caring person. She seemed rough on the outside and demanding, but she was very sweet. People always wanted something from her, and that's why she was standoffish. But she really had a warm heart.
And Lester, you don't need to answer all the questions right now. We're going to come back to you. We're going to kind of go talk story, okay? I want to add on Jackie Pung. Jackie Pung was the first woman of color on the ladies' PGA in the United States. And she was a Waikoloa resident. She did a fabulous job with she did a junior golf program, and Jackie has passed away, but her daughter still lives here in Waikoloa. Okay. I'm going to move on, Peter, to you. You're next. Is that good? Peter, the one who's only lived here 35 years. So, Peter, you have to have been one of the original owners here. Peter is a Scotsman, which makes me love him, because I am a Scotsman. Not as much as you are. But he and his wife were living in Australia, and he came here with Canada, France. Or, I'm going to let you talk. You talk. You tell your story.
I've been in the field of astronomy since 1960. Started off in Edinburgh, the Royal Observatory in Edinburgh. And within 3 years we emigrated to Australia. And there I was employed by the Australian National University in Canberra. And we stayed 11 years, and then we moved up to Canada. By then we had a son and a daughter, so we dropped the son off in Toronto. And then my daughter and my wife and I came down to Waikoloa. Well, first of all, we were in Hilo for a year. And then the company moved their offices across to Waimea. And so that was me coming. In fact, it was my daughter who, she chose to live in Waikoloa, and now she lives in Hilo. Anyway, going back, 77, we actually came into the house here, and it was Ernie Ford who got us that, and we rented that house, and then we were able to buy it. It originally belonged to Dennis Maples, who was the guy, the Chevron, yes. And so he then moved up the village to where Andrew Acow is now. Yeah. So that was us getting started off in Waikoloa.
Good, thank you. We're going to have time to get you more here. Everybody's going to have a turn. We really want this to be a little bit more talk story. I'm going to move on to Diane Rivas. Diane, I told you was with this week, but when I had sent her the question, she says, no, you have to start when Carlos and I, her dear husband, let me tell the story about when they came here and why. So, Diane.
Thank you, Ruth. Carlos and I were married in October of '73, and he had just closed his advertising agency. As that agency, he had been involved with Boise Cascade and getting this whole project going for some years. In fact, I'm told that he helped organize the busloads of people to go over to Hilo to testify to get Boise to get their permitting. And they had a discovery pavilion in Waikiki to start selling property even before they got all the developing done. And that was before I knew him. But in December of '74, he got a phone call. Bob Hoffman, with whom he'd done other projects, said, I am now the project manager at Waikoloa Village, and I need you now to do all the marketing, promotion, advertising, etc. So by February of '74, he's commuting on weekdays while I'm still in Honolulu with the girls till they got out of school. And so later that year, June of that year, we moved to the Big Island. Lived in Waimea for the first year, moved to a rental in Waikoloa Village in '75, built our own home, and we moved in April of '77, and I'm still in that house. But when the main thing Carlos had to do was get Waikoloa on the map, right? Help sell those lots. Okay, well that became the Great Waikoloa Horse Race, the Great Waikoloa Rodeo, the Great Waikoloa Bike Race. Oh, we had more fun, we met more wonderful people from all over the world. These bikers, they're different from the guys who do the music festival. We had the Scottish Games, we had, some of you may remember some of these events. It was just a lot of fun. He brought polo over to the Big Island. We had arena polo inside our Waikoloa Arena. 3-man polo. It was fabulous. And so anyway, we had a lot of fun. And I guess he did a good enough job because by 1978, Transcon already owned the whole development, and they phased out his department. That was it. So that's where the mini rodeos were born. I don't know if any of you remember the mini rodeos that we had at the stables for a while. And we did those for the groups. We would bust them up, 300, 600, whatever, for the night, and they'd have a mini rodeo and music and dancing and food and the whole thing over at the arena. And the catering was always done by the restaurant. Of course, that was part of the deal. Yeah, so that's how we got here. I'm glad I'm still here. Thank you.
Well, before you take the mic away yet, Diane, you were saying that actually Waikoloa did what started less about the housing for the employees.
Well, they called it, I believe how they dubbed it, at least what Carlos referred it to, was a recreational residential area, or recreational residential development. And when all the development started down there, yes, they knew they had to have bedroom community. And so it developed more into that. But I'm not sure that that was the original intent. It could have been. I wasn't around at that time.
And originally it was more of a retirement community.
There was a lot of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'm going to move on to, who am I moving on to? Let me go to my next page. Oh. Is it you? No. No, it's not Rudy. It's not Rudy. I know if it's Rudy. I know he's not. Oh, it is Rudy. Darn it. I got way many too many cigarettes. Okay. Rudy, you get to talk now. All right, so tell us about your getting here, Waikoloa Plumbing. You don't have to answer all the questions now, just start.
I moved to Waikoloa in 1984, and I'd been on the Big Island for 4 years, and I moved from Oahu, and I moved to Oahu in 1970 from California. So when I moved to Waikoloa, '84, I says, well, I need to start a business. I did have a business in the plumbing trade, but I didn't have my contractor's license. So in '89, I applied and got my contractor's license. And I've been here ever since. I left once and it didn't work out, so came back home to Waikoloa, and this is my home. And I'm so glad to be here. I love this place. My kids love this place, and they grew up and went to school. Ruth taught Tyson from the 5th grade, and Paula. And thank God for A+ and AYSO. They helped a lot. And just glad to be here. I'm glad to serve the community in the plumbing service in this area.
Thank you, Rudy. Jack, you can give it to Cris. Okay, Cris Hafner. Cris, as I said, was one of my oldest friends, and she was young. Not that she's not young now. She was younger when she moved here, and it was interesting because she decided to move here. She was the only young person I knew in Waikoloa, and she moved here and started her business. So, Cris, I want you to talk about that a little bit and tell us.
Well, when I came to Waikoloa in '84, we were looking around in '84. I had come from New York City, and so it was number one a culture shock, and then I started a business. I met my husband, and he was in Puako, and I was living in Kailua Kona. And he absolutely did not want to go to Kailua Kona. And so we found the only place in between, which was Waikoloa Village. And that was fine with me because it was much more familiar in the type of neighborhood that I was accustomed to coming from a city compared to a coffee bar. So I felt a lot more comfortable being in Waikoloa Village. The weather attracted us, dryness. It was a bit cooler because of the elevation, and yes, it was remote, but so was the whole place compared to Manhattan. And so we moved into a condo at Paniolo Club Condos, and we started our business there. I think one of the first projects we had was actually with the Village Association to design the logo. And it's still there, and I sometimes don't even notice, and every once in a while I go, oh my gosh, it's still there. And that was the kind of work we started with. We used to have to drive all the way down to Kona to get photostats because the technology was completely different than it is today. It wasn't digital. I remember getting our first fax machines, so we didn't have to get in the car. We could actually fax proofs and things to our clients. So that was kind of the downside of being in the middle of nowhere, was that we had to go everywhere in order to do any kind of business. We had to get in the car and go. We had our daughter in 92, and I remember, I forget which year it was, probably you would remember, Ken, when they did a door-to-door survey to find out whether we had enough children in the village to justify having a school. And fortunately for us, the school was built by the time Madeline was ready to go to the school. And it was so fantastic to have a school that was close by and that was brand new. I mean, it was better than any school I had ever been in. Being in Manhattan, everything was falling apart. So it was so neat to have, and the library, when that got built, was amazing. And the support in the community, I mean, with Auntie Lorna, and Dennis was in preschool with Maddie, and they went through the school all the way up. I mean, it's just really a neat experience to have a family here and to really know people when you originally grow up in a community where you barely know, people, five people around you, everybody, but is pretty much of a stranger in the city. So those were the pluses. From when she got older though, the downside of being here was that all of her friends were in Kona. And so, you know, the socialization was challenging, but I guess, you know, over the years that's improved.
Thank you, Cris. Okay. And Cris did a lovely segue there for us, and we're going to move over to Ken Melrose to talk about how we did get, not the building you're sitting in right now, because this school built out in 3 phases. And so the first one opened in 94. The second one, this building, and one of the 2-story buildings, Building H, opened. Ken will tell you that he did not build this building, and they made oops on the cafeteria. We couldn't open it for months because it wasn't done correctly. That wasn't him. That wasn't him. And then we built the final in 2001. Bless Paula's heart. She patiently worked out of a classroom instead of a library. And we opened the library, and Paula and I both served on the design committee for the library. If you go in the library, it's beautiful, and yes, we will take credit for some of that. And also I-building, and those are the only permanent buildings on campus. But Ken, walk us back and tell us about where you started on this, okay? Thank you.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I turned that one off.
This was warmed up.
Yeah, that was warmed up.
Thank you, and I apologize to all these wonderful residents of Waikoloa and friends, many of them for years. I've never lived in Waikoloa.
Yeah.
So I apologize. I flew over it for the first time when I came to my brother's graduation in 1972. And I had a Cedar Homes business in Waimea, and I built the first home here for Jim Atkinson in 77. So I have been here for a while, but when I joined Waikoloa Land Company in 1984, the Hyatt was starting, and the transition for what was happening at Waikoloa Land Company was pretty significant, so they needed somebody that could help and pay attention to issues and projects that were going on in the village. And the whole focus for Transcontinental Properties from the time they bought the property was the Waikoloa Beach Resort. And they didn't have a lot of attentiveness to the village at all. And so one of my jobs as planner for Waikoloa Land was to find ways to satisfy all the zoning conditions that had come with the resort and with the village. And they had to dedicate a piece of land, and was the primary requirement. So I had begun the process of talking to the Department of Education about how we could get how they would like to select a piece of land and how big it had to be. And of course they wanted twice what the ordinance said we wanted. So we worked that all out, and we were prepared to give the land to the to the state for them to build a school, but it had become pretty obvious that that was going to be just give them the land, and how long would it take before we would see a school. So we started bothering the Department of Education to actually bring the school up in the priorities for their funding. And they felt very firmly that Waikoloa was a retirement community, which was its initial focus. And until development started down in the resort and they started building affordable housing across the way and a couple other projects, there wasn't a lot of resident with children here. And so, as Christine pointed out, we said, oh yeah. So we went and did a door-to-door survey with some absolutely wonderful people in the community who are not here any longer. George Baker, John and Ruth McKinney, Alice Heavey. We just went door to door, and we were able to expand the network of where the school went from all the way down into Puako. Gals like Alice were absolutely incredible because they were totally unabashed. You know, are you pregnant? Do you plan to get pregnant, and how soon? So we came back with a group with So we came back with a list, and I would tell you at the time, two residents of the community were my secretary. One of them was Winnie Hooser, which was an absolute delight, and Cobb. And so we collated all that data and brought it to the fact that it really did show that it was very close to the thresholds that the Department of Education was going to want to do. And so I kept bugging the building guy in Hilo, superintendent. His name was Herb Watanabe. Now our Board of Education member, when he was, and he got so tired of me showing up in his office. He said, if you want a school so badly, why don't you build it? To which we replied, you can? And so we were able to put together the first ever in the state of Hawaii real estate transaction agreement where Waikoloa Land Company, with the help of First Hawaiian Bank, for the interim funding, fronted the school, and the Department of Accounting and General Services bought it from us as we built it. Now this really happened. There are a couple of individuals. Stars really did line up. The superintendent for the Department of Education was Charlie Taguchi, former senator, and I think he was at St. John's by the Sea when we were there in Honolulu. And his facilities chair was Al Suga, and both of those guys had worked for Morrison Knudsen when they built the roads and the quarry in this village. And they were in charge of the quarry, so they knew Waikoloa and they wanted to see it happen. So it was really fun.
Let me just bring part of Ken's story full circle. Alice Heavey that he's talking about is now Alice Mulligan. She is a middle school math teacher here at Waikoloa Elementary and Middle School. So yes, and she is one of the people who helped us this year to make annual yearly progress. You'll hear it mentioned as AYP, but we are one of the few we are one of the schools in the state who is now in good standing under No Child Left Behind. And we did that. So Alice is still pushing hard, doing good. So we give her a big hand. Actually, okay. Continuing with the school, I definitely want you to hear from Paula Kamiya. Paula really, see how Paula looks? Paula, first time I met Paula, see how pretty she looks? She always, I thought, who is this woman? Because she brought a cart. We didn't have a library, right? So she came to my classroom. I was one of the original teachers here in 1994, and this woman was pushing by in the cart and bringing these books, and she looked stunning. And I'm like, oh, this is our library, because librarians aren't supposed to look like that. So, anyway, Paula's always had a tremendous sense of style. If you ever walked in her house and saw her shoe closet, it's amazing. Not anymore. Oh, she's retired. She's reformed her ways. Anyway, I do really want to. Paula has rich history on this, and one of the reasons I wanted her is because she is a very good historian. If we'd have gone into her files, we'd be still watching the slideshow. But I want to commend Paula. She and Lois Alandada, who no longer lives in the village, but she was a resident here. Lois Alandada is a brilliant PhD who worked for the General Accounting Office in Washington, D.C. She and I were in D.C. together. I moved here from D.C., so I went through the same culture shock she did. But Lois Ellen is a statistician and knows how to write grants unbelievably. And she and Paula got together, and this was before anyone had heard of 21st century grants, because it was 1997. Yeah.
Newsletter came through my junk mail.
Right. Paula was one of those people, because we get junk in the DOE all the time. You get piles and piles, but usually, but Paula reads and applied for this, and I want you to talk about that, and I want you to talk about the richness that brought and continues to have here at the school. So, Paula Kamiya.
Yeah, it was one of those numerous newsletters from the federal government that came across my desk, and we had a group of very dedicated teachers that were trying to, it was through the PCNC, the Parent Community Network Coordinator.
We love acronyms in the DOE.
That's right, I'm retired, so I didn't remember what they stand for. Anyway, they were trying to get like a homework hotline and all this kind of thing going on. And I was reading this newsletter, and I said to myself, this sounds like what we're trying to do. So I took it to Art Souza's office. He was our principal at the time. And I said, Art, is anyone doing this or whatever? And he says, no. And I said, well, it's a shame. It sounds like something we could use. And it was during Clinton's administration. And he says, well, why don't you do it? And I went, me? He says, well, I'll help, and I'll get other people to help you. So that's how it all started. And the funny story about Hawaii, and we didn't get the first round, which was announced at the beginning of the summer, the fiscal year, July. After school started that fall, I got a call in my tiny little library, which was not a classroom, it was that little room on the opposite end of the admin building. We were supposed to be there 3 years, and we ended up there 6 years, and we'll talk about that later. But anyway,
Classroom now.
is it? Okay. Anyway, we wrote the grant, but didn't looked at the map on the internet. No, we didn't make it. I got a call during one of my classes, and a lady from the Department of Education in Washington, D.C. asked me, she said, are you sitting down? I said, no. And she said, well, you better sit down. So I sat down, and she says, you got the grant. Where should you get $100,000 for 3 years, total $300,000. To whom do I write the check, and where do I send it? And I went, just a minute. So I ran down the hall, which Art was on the other end of the building, and I said, Art, we got the grant. And I had the phones in my office. We didn't have portables then. And Art and I are jumping up and down in a circle in his office, and I said, but she's on the phone. So anyway, the quandary was, we didn't know, we were such novices. We didn't know what all the red tape of the state. And the Department of Ed didn't either, and they were very upset when they found out that this was the only state where the money went to the state, and they would divvy it out to us as they saw fit. And plus, for administration costs, they ended up taking about 16% off the top. But it did wonders for the school. I remember we had a newsletter that was like 6-8 pages long of all the activities. It's the only 24/7 school that I've ever worked in. There was something going on all the time. And it was because of that 21st Century Learning Grant from the Clinton administration. They're still going on, aren't they? Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much, Paula. And yes, 21st Century Grants are still happening. The idea of the 21st Century Grant was to use these facilities, which are not used after school hours or on nights and weekends, just as we are right now tonight. They're large public facilities, as you know, and if you look at our vision and mission statement, actually our vision statement is back here. It needs to be updated because we were the Voyagers, then we added the middle school paddlers, and now we're the Navigators. But on that vision statement, which I was one of the authors of, it says we are the heart of the community of Waikoloa. So we are intentionally that. And but I digress. The concept of the 21st Century Grants was that you would start this, and initially the classes that the people would come to were free. They were funded, so the tutors or whatever it was we were doing, it was a community learning center and they got funded. This is big, but we were the first people on the island to get it. Now they're done more within a complex of multiple schools in an area. But while we are not used as heavily as we were at that time in terms of every day, we still are very heavily used by the community. You still can are you still doing ukulele after school? Okay, so Lukulawani, our Hawaiian studies teacher, offers ukulele classes. You can take music. There are art classes. There Zumba. There's a lot of things you can come. This is where I learned to do yoga. And then events like this can happen at the school where you just fill out a use of facilities form and say we want to use the school. But the 21st Century Grants really launched that and have allowed us to have that kind of richness in our community. So, okay, we went through round one. Ready for round two? I got some questions that I was just dying to ask. Peter, I'm coming back to you. Peter's house is the house on Lahi Lahi that has the turret. that you see flying the flag? Everybody know Peter's house? That's Peter's house. Peter, now, and who told me? Kathy is the one that said, I called Kathy and said, asked her if she wanted to talk. Kathy Tarleton back here. And she said, you need to call Peter. And I said, okay. So Peter was very gracious, but he had rockin' New Year's Eve parties. I want to hear about it.
Okay, the Scots celebrate the New Year coming in. We start on the last day of December. It's called Hogmanay, and we've had some great parties. The custom is that the first person to come over your doorstep on the New Year, they have to have two things with them: a piece of coal and a good bottle of scotch. But, you know, my first wife, Cris, and I, we both played accordion, and so there was no lack of music in our house, ever. Unfortunately, I lost Cris and I lost my second wife, but I now own 5 accordions, so I can only play one at a time.
What? Party part? Did you dance? Did you boogie? Did you?
Yes.
What did you do?
Well, I have 2 kilts, so I always wear a kilt.
And now that we have you on stage in front of all these people, what does a Scotsman wear under his kilt?
Well, the standard answer to that is that there's nothing worn under the kilt, it's all in good order.
Very diplomatic. Okay. Thank you, Peter. That was good. I'm going to ask you to pass that mic. Rudy. In fact, Rudy likes to talk. He wanted to be on stage so much. I'm lying. We had to twist his arm. I want you, I mentioned Auntie Lorna had made this ring. I want you to tell people who don't know who Auntie Lorna is and why she's known as the Pied Piper of Waikoloa.
Hello. Auntie Lorna, she is the godmother to all the foster kids in Waikoloa area. I can't imagine, I don't know the count of how many foster kids she's had in her home in the last 15 years. I know it, sometimes she'd have like 8 to 10 kids living in her house. And that's the truth. And she would take care of them. She would take them to school. She would feed them. She would do everything. And she is amazing. Everybody in Waikoloa knows Auntie Lorna. And ask any kid, they know Auntie Lorna. She's the queen. Always will be.
And Auntie Lorna, she did work, Paula was saying, she did work at the post office originally. And to this day, Auntie Lorna, after school, runs a homework club here for the middle school kids. So Auntie Lorna is still here, and she'd be here tonight, but Auntie Lorna is no longer Queen Shigi. She's now Saito, because she got married. And her husband lives on Maui, so she couldn't be with us tonight. So, yeah, and she's not back yet.
Peter, I got a question for you. Do you know who the mongoose is? The person, one of the first residents, and he was nicknamed the mongoose. Do you know who that is? That's Ernie Ford.
Really?
Tell us about her.
Well, he's got.
What was he called? Do you know? Oh, yeah, you know her.
Oh, yes.
Okay, tell us about her. But you don't know how to spell the name.
I was told that they called him the mongoose because he was the first resident, and somehow he got that name.
Well, I knew they called it home the 19th hole. But I do remember when he organized the renting of this home I'm in. And he said, because it was a bit of a mess, the previous person who had been in had taken kids in, and I remember there was a chandelier there, and between ketchup and rice sticking off the chandelier. But Ernie said, "Don't worry, I'll get it painted up for you and everything." Da da da. And it was one of those paint jobs that after he said the job was done and we're going through the house and we came to the bathroom and the door was open, guess what? They never shut the door. And so behind the door was the original paint. He was a character.
Okay, Diane, I know that actually we could just sit and listen to you because you have Diane has so many stories. So I'm just going to ask you to tell us a story that you just don't want these people to leave here tonight without hearing.
Well, I will tell a story on myself first. In about 72, I think it was, I came over for the day with a fellow who had done all the electrical work around here, and they were having a big party because all the street lights were in and everything was done. And we drove, from the airport up a road and then coming down into the village. And the only thing I knew about Waikoloa at that time was TV ads with Leroy Lindsay riding his horse through the eucalyptus grove up high. "This is my land." Well, we got closer and closer to the village, and I looked around and I said, "Who would want to live here?" Well, then I met Carlos, and in less than 2 years, I was living here. Now, one thing you need to know, you saw the development and the dates and all that. Those of us who lived here in 74 and 75, before the store opened, we had no gas station, no post office, no bank, no store, no groceries, nothing. You had to plan ahead, get everything you needed in Waimea or Kona before you came home, or you were just stuck. You couldn't just run to the market. So now, you said the store opened in 75. I thought Gary Ishimini had it before the Watsons did. The Watsons had it first?
Watson's works for Boise.
Okay. Because I know Gary had it. That was after. Yeah. But we were glad to get a store. A little convenience store.
And we try to get Gary here tonight, but he's way stage shy. So,
Oh, you're done?
okay. Paula, same question to you.
Same question was.
What do you really want the people to know? We are, you guys, let me stop for 1 second, because I'm not supposed to be moderating here. We started a little late, and so we want to leave time for questions from the audience on this. But if we can just let people be sure and tell you the story they want to, or tell you whatever it is that they really think is burning that you ought to hear about Waikoloa, and then we'll open it up to questions. Can I have your permission to run a little bit past 7:30? We were supposed to. Are we good with that? Are we good with that? Okay. Oh yeah. All right. Good. Go.
I wanted to share my thankfulness, and now I'm one of them, of the retired people and the support that they had in volunteering at the library and the school, and I'll explain the reading garden and so on. Anyway, I was in that small room. When I interviewed for the job in spring of '94, one of my questions of the principal, Dr. Hilliard, was, "When do you want the library open?" And he said, "The first day of school, of course." And I went, "Okay, I am librarian at Honoka'a High School, and I teach A+ after school, and now I'm going to order $65,000 worth of books and have them all ready by August." Well, I did. So the volunteers, the seniors were wonderful. We got all the books on the shelves and everything ready to go. The principal forgot to order the software, and there were no cards in the book, so nothing could be checked out, but the children enjoyed the facility. So part of those volunteers were Ruth and John McKinney, and Flo, and I can't remember the last name, they've since moved away. But the reading garden came about after the school was built. Ruth and John continued to volunteer at the school, and John passed away. And when that happened, Ruth said, "I would like to have some kind of commemoration for John at your school." And that's how the reading garden came about. And Rudy was my plumber of choice, and my White Sands built my home, and they all came together, volunteering to design and build the reading garden in memory of John McKinney. And Ruth is now, she was at Hololai, and now she's in northern New York, near her children. My one funny story about the building of the library that was cut from the second increment and then finally came 6 years during the third one. It was under construction, just about ready to be able to occupy, but there were still quite a few things to be done. And the computers arrived. There were like 60 computers all stacked up in the library, and I was doing my thing as usual. And everyone, all of a sudden, I look around, there's no one there. All the doors are unlocked. I have no key. I don't know who to contact. What do I do with these 60 computers? So I just happen to have a mosquito net in I save everything. So I made myself a bed on the table and I slept in the library all night guarding the 60 computers. So that was my funny story.
Unbelievable. Thank you, Paula. And Paula, crazy woman she was, she used to, by the way, I was Cat in the Hat this last year. I was the Cat in the Hat. But on Dr. Seuss night, she would have the kids. We didn't just have a Dr. Seuss party. She had a Dr. Seuss sleepover with elementary children in the library. Okay, so it was unbelievable. But she enriched our school so much by her participation here. Lester, you got the mic.
Yeah.
Go for it.
I've got 2 episodes I'd like to share with you. First of all, the Great Waikoloa Horse Race and Rodeo was quite an event. We had thousands of people here. Our little restaurant, we catered between 2,000 to 3,000 meals those 2 days. Carlos Rivas, Diane's husband, was instrumental in putting these programs together, and we had Gabby Pahamui here as entertainment, Loretta Lynn, so it was quite an event. And of course, that was during the days that Boise was trying to promote Waikoloa Village. The second episode I want to tell you has to do with Dennis Maples. It was Dennis Maples' birthday, and I was the manager at the Clubhouse Restaurant at that time. And I'd worked a split shift, taken a break. And Dennis had come off the golf course, and Ed Stanek and his buddies brought in a stripper from Honolulu. While the woman was dressed in a police uniform, she walked into the bar, asked are you Dennis? And he said yes, handcuffed him to the chair, jumped on the counter and started doing her thing. What makes it interesting is about 40 feet away is the captain of the police, Al Chong. He's on the putting green. So she does her thing. Of course, my employees waited until I was gone. They closed all the sliding doors and proceeded to have the program. Once it was over with, she uncuffed Dennis and with carrying the jacket, strutted through the dining room. Well, there in the corner of the dining room was John Raleigh, who happens to be a columnist for the West Hawaii newspaper. Of course, the following morning, I received a couple of phone calls from the liquor department, from the police department, for someone trying to be an imposter. But I thought those 2 incidents were interesting that I might share with you. Thank you.
Okay. If anyone doesn't have a burning story, I'm going to move down here because I do want to, when you ask your question, I want you to ask it in the mic. And maybe I can do this. kind of feel like Vanna or something, but okay. And then we'll wrap up. So, Lisa. No, Lisa, come here. I know, well, so come here. Ask your question. Come here. Don't be shy.
I'm speaking to anyone. A whole group of us want to know what the big brown thing is at the top of Waikoloa Road. What does it represent? Who thought of it? What does it mean to us?
Who's got the mic on stage? Who's got the mic? Do you know? Ken. Diane, go.
It's my understanding that it represents the sale of the Polynesian canoes, and it did have a sign on it that said Waikoloa. I don't think it had the logo, but it did say Waikoloa. That's gone. But that, I don't know what year it was built. I mean, it's been there forever. It's kind of fallen down. 72. At Boise as well? Okay. Yeah. Isn't it like a shape of a Polynesian canoe? Yeah, I think that's what it represents.
Yeah, apparently not enough that we can figure it out. Okay, who else has? Actually, Annette. Is Annette here? Where are you? Right here. Annette. Annette sent me an email. We had already pulled together this program, but she sent me an email and told me she was the 42nd house here or something. 45th house, I'm sorry. I was in the ballpark. Annette, you want to come share with us?
Yeah. Come on. Oh, you want to sit down? I don't know if I can reach you. I'll try. There you go.
Number one, that thing up there is a viewing.
Close. No. You just
It's a viewing tower.
There you go. It's a viewing.
I don't know if you still can, but we used to be able to climb up, and there was a platform there, and you could see the whole coastline. And it did have the Boise Cascade, the wave and the wave symbol on it way in the beginning. But when Transcontinental took over, they took it off and didn't replace it with anything. Another thing about what Les said is that great horse race. The funniest part of it was when Jackie Pung, who at that time weighed a lot,
Yeah.
and Bob Hoffman, who also weighed a lot, were in a horse race, except the horses couldn't run. So they had a horse walk. We were the 45th house. We moved in on Christmas Eve, 1975, with two young sons who were very worried that Santa Claus wasn't going to be able to find this house. I hate it. We were the 45th house, as I said, and most of the other people were the retiree. So my kids had many grandparents. They couldn't get away with a thing. When I would get phone calls, even when they were in high school, we were driving back behind Michael, and he was speeding. So we'd walk in the house and I'd say, busted kid. But the one thing I do want to share, the one part of it, is when I first moved here, I knew something was missing, but I couldn't figure it out. It's like, what don't you see, sort of thing. And finally I realized it was bird sounds. There were no bird sounds because there were no birds, because there were no trees. The only trees were on the golf course. So every tree you see here is put on somebody's MasterCard and shipped in, brought in here, and planted and watered and nurtured too. And I hope that you will ask Helen about the early post office. She had the first post office, which was about the size of a broom closet, or maybe a little bit bigger. But Christmas time really hit her hard every year.
Is Helen here? Yes. Up here. Oh, let me reach and give this to Helen. Thank you,
Annette. Helen. Right here. Helen. Come on down. So you had the first post office? You had the first post office? Is that what you said, Annette?
Yeah.
She had the first. You had the first post office?
Well, I did not start the post office.
Here, honey, don't be shy.
I didn't start the post office, but I worked there for about 7.5 years. So I know a lot of the old people that have been around, Ernie Ford and Jackie Pong and a lot of the other people. Of course, we only had very few people in '83, so it was just a little hole in the wall that was the post office at the time. So I've lived here, it'll be 30 years, January 5th. 1983. So I still know a lot of the people and really enjoy living in Waikoloa.
Ruth, I have a question of Helen and maybe some other people.
Okay.
The house next door to me, I made an offer on and ended up building next door to it. But everyone, it's one of the original houses, and everyone calls, oh, that's Marguerite's house. Does anyone know who Marguerite is?
That's on Pakanu.
Pakanu Street.
Pakanu Street. Lester, you know?
I know of her. She was an artist. Yeah, the artist, and don't know much about her. She's very elusive. She's not an outgoing person, but I do admire her work.
And she wouldn't sell her house. Okay. Question? Yes, sir.
Thank you. Just to add to your history, we spent many years in Saudi Arabia, and they have a tree there called frangipani. Those trees were brought back to Saudi Arabia from Hawaii by early Americans who went to Saudi Arabia. So it was from this big island that all the frangipanis in Saudi Arabia came from.
Thank you. I wanted to add to what Annette was sharing about her kids having all the grandparents. One of the things that I think is wonderful about Waikoloa, I raised my own biological children here as well, and Waikoloa is still that way in terms of, you know, people would say, oh, I saw your daughter at, you know, and so I'd say, and I go, really? Really? And I go home, excuse me, you were where? And where were you supposed to be? And she's going, why are these people ratting me out? And I said, honey, they're not. They're just saying, oh, I saw your daughter. And so Waikoloa is still that way. You know, I always call it the little big island, and I love that about it. I mean, I love that about the tightness here. This is a wonderful place to raise your kids. Anne was involved. I knew Anne. She used to do it when we did the 21st Century Grant. Anne had we had to. You don't get money, and particularly not that kind of money, from the federal government without really accounting for it. And Anne is the one that helped document that. So, Anne.
I have a question. I live in one of the first houses here. My house was built in 1974 by a family named Beer Kegger. And I'm just wondering if anybody knows about the beer keggers. And there was also a legend that there was some gold buried somewhere in the property.
Are you still looking?
No gold there. I know the husband and the wife beer keggers. They were good. Yeah, they were Alaskans, and they were wonderful people, very outgoing, and loved to have people over to their place and use their swimming pool. But very outgoing, very warm.
Hey, who else has a question or something you want to share? Right here. Oh, hang on. Her and I'll come back to you.
I'd just like to say something about the early volunteer fire department.
Please do.
Because there are lots of tales that we could tell about that. But in the early 80s, there were George Kerner and George Baker and Butch Gomes, I believe, was the acting fire chief, Cris Beebe, my husband Paul Sorvitz, and others. And they had a tank truck and a couple of other little rigs that weren't much. And one day they had a fire down towards Kauai, and they called on our fire department to go down and help. And they were given a telephone pole to watch. Make sure that it didn't get on fire, because it was fairly close to the road. So there they were, and finally the fire got to the point where it was almost there, and the boys started up the fire engine, and you could hear the water going around and around, and they, okay, let her go, and nothing happened. The water just kept going around and around. They tried a few other things. Okay, let's try it again. Nothing happened. Finally, they had to call on one of the other fire companies to come and say, oh, you've got to open this switch so that the water goes out.
Darling, this is what those fire drills are for. You want to share something, Susan? Or you want to, let her, Mike?
I'll share one tiny thing. Hello, I'm Ken Melrose's wife, and we lived in Waimea, and when you talk about those parties that they used to have, that they would bus all the tourists up to the stables, and there were a bunch of people in Waimea who'd be herded together by kind of drama people. I'm thinking Joe Diatalevi, and I'm trying to think who actually hired us, but we were actually paid money to come down and dress up, and I dressed up as a pregnant, like the sheriff's daughter. So I had this dress, I had a pillow stuffed underneath, there was a sheriff. We met all these people, they drove them up, they got off the bus, my daddy, the sheriff, grabbed some young man and said, "Look what you did to my daughter." It was just a spoofy thing to do, but that is what was going on up there. They're all laughing and drinking and taking everybody up in their horses, and they're playing with things, and we had several, then when that poor guy was done with being the daddy, then we'd run off and find another innocent man, and of course his wife would often get a little, but it was fun.
Thank you, Mila. That's a very good story. Susan, you may have to walk a little forward. You have a question, or are you you're gonna have to come closer. Come closer.